Jamal Washington, 18-year-old tech CEO of Novatech Solutions, stands humiliated in front of first-class passengers as flight attendant Brenda denies his boarding pass. His phone screen flashes a $2.5 million company valuation notification. The white woman behind him gets escorted to first class despite having an identical ticket. A passenger starts recording. Before I dive deeper into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever witnessed or experienced discrimination while traveling. Trust me, what happens next in this story will make your jaw drop. Jamal Washington was not your average teenager from South Side Chicago. From an early age, he displayed exceptional aptitude for technology and mathematics, scoring in the top percentile of every standardized test he took. His brilliance was nurtured by his single mother, Keisha, who worked double shifts as a nurse at Chicago Memorial Hospital to provide for her only child. "Never let anyone tell you what you can't do," Keisha would tell Jamal every morning before school. "But always remember that in this world, you'll need to work twice as hard to get half as far." Despite their limited resources, Jamal found ways to pursue his passion. At age 11, he began teaching himself coding languages using the free computers at the local public library. The librarian, Mrs. Carter, noticed his dedication and would often save educational books for him, sometimes even letting him stay past closing time. "That boy would sit at that computer for hours, typing away like his life depended on it," Mrs. Carter later recalled. "I've never seen such determination in someone so young." By 14, Jamal was already building simple apps and websites for local businesses, charging minimal fees to build his portfolio. He saved every penny, eventually purchasing a refurbished laptop that became his most prized possession. He carried it everywhere, coding during lunch breaks and late into the night after finishing his homework. At 16, while his peers were focused on typical teenage concerns, Jamal identified a critical gap in educational technology. Many of his fellow students, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds, struggled to access STEM resources and opportunities. This observation sparked the idea for Novatech Solutions, an educational platform designed to provide free coding lessons, virtual lab simulations, and mentorship connections for underprivileged students. "I just wanted to create something that would have helped me when I was younger," Jamal explained in his first pitch video, which he recorded in his bedroom using a borrowed camera. "Technology shouldn't be a luxury. It should be accessible to everyone, regardless of their zip code or family income." The pitch video unexpectedly went viral in tech circles, catching the attention of Dylan Reynolds, a partner at Horizon Ventures, a venture capital firm known for investing in socially conscious startups. Reynolds was impressed not only by Jamal's technical skills but by his vision and maturity. After 6 months of development and beta testing in Chicago public schools, Novatech launched officially. The results were immediate and impressive. Schools reported increased STEM engagement, improved test scores, and higher rates of students expressing interest in technology careers. The success stories poured in, with teachers crediting the platform for rekindling enthusiasm for learning among previously disengaged students. Last month, Jamal secured a $2.5 million investment from Horizon Ventures, valuing his company at $10 million. The funding would allow Novatech to expand nationwide and develop more advanced features. This investment milestone coincided with another exciting opportunity, an invitation to meet with Microsoft executives in San Francisco to discuss a potential partnership that would integrate Novatech's platform with Microsoft's educational tools. This meeting represented the biggest opportunity of Jamal's young career. He spent weeks preparing his presentation, refining his business plan, and rehearsing answers to potential questions. For the first time, he decided to splurge on a first-class airline ticket from Chicago to San Francisco. The extra space would allow him to work during the 6-hour flight, and arriving well-rested would help him make the best possible impression on the Microsoft team. "I've never flown first class before," he told his mother the night before his departure. "I know it's expensive, but I think it's a good investment for this trip." Keisha helped him pack his one good suit and gave him a new tie she'd saved up to buy for this occasion. As she adjusted the tie around his neck, she looked into her son's eyes with a mixture of pride and concern. "You deserve every success coming your way, Jamal. Just remember what I've always taught you about moving through this world. Some people will only see your skin, not your brilliance. Keep your head high, but also keep it safe." Jamal nodded, understanding the weight of her words but buoyed by excitement about the opportunities ahead. He had beaten the odds his entire life. This trip represented the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. As he set his alarm for 5 a.m. and triple-checked his documents, he couldn't help but feel that his life was about to change forever, though not in the way he anticipated. Jamal arrived at O'Hare International Airport 3 hours before his scheduled departure, dressed in business casual attire, dark blue slacks, a light blue button-down shirt, and the new tie his mother had given him. He kept his blazer carefully folded in his carry-on to avoid wrinkling it before the meeting. His premature arrival wasn't just from excitement, his mother's voice echoed in his head, "Always be early, especially when it matters." After checking in online and receiving his mobile boarding pass, Jamal found a quiet corner in the terminal to continue refining his presentation. With his laptop balanced on his knees and his wireless earbuds playing low classical music to help him focus, he barely noticed the time passing. Only when the first boarding announcement came did he pack up his equipment, straighten his tie, and head toward the gate. The boarding process began with the usual call for passengers needing special assistance, followed by an announcement for first-class passengers. Jamal took a deep breath, checked his boarding pass once more, and stepped forward, joining the short line of predominantly white business travelers in expensive suits and casual luxury wear. As the line moved forward, he couldn't help but notice the sidelong glances from other first-class passengers. A middle-aged white man in a tailored suit looked him up and down with narrowed eyes. An elderly woman clutched her handbag tighter as he stood behind her. Jamal had experienced these microaggressions his entire life, but he pushed the discomfort aside, focusing instead on the important meeting ahead. When his turn came to board, flight attendant Brenda Peterson, a blonde woman in her mid-40s with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, looked at his digital boarding pass with immediate skepticism. "I think you're in the wrong line, young man," she said loudly, not bothering to lower her voice. "This is for first-class boarding." "Yes, I know," Jamal replied politely, turning his phone screen toward her. "I have a first-class ticket." Brenda frowned and took his phone, studying the boarding pass with exaggerated scrutiny. "This doesn't look right. How did you get this ticket?" The question hung in the air, its implication clear to everyone within earshot. Jamal felt heat rising to his face but maintained his composure. "I purchased it through the airline's website," he answered calmly. "Is there a problem?" "Wait here," Brenda said curtly, stepping away to confer with her colleague at the desk. She returned with the gate supervisor, Gerald Thompson, a balding man with a permanent frown etched into his face. "Sir, can I see some identification?" Thompson demanded, emphasizing "sir" in a way that made it sound anything but respectful. Jamal produced his driver's license and company ID card, which clearly showed his position as CEO of Novatech Solutions. Thompson barely glanced at them before handing them back. "There seems to be some confusion with your booking. We need to verify this ticket. Please step aside while we sort this out." As Jamal was being interrogated, a white businesswoman in her 30s, Diane Miller, approached the gate with the exact same class of ticket. Brenda's demeanor transformed instantly, her tight smile becoming warm and welcoming. "Good afternoon, ma'am, welcome aboard. Right this way to first class," she said, scanning Diane's pass without hesitation and ushering her forward with a flourish. "Excuse me," Jamal interjected, his patience wearing thin. "She has the same type of ticket as I do. Why is she allowed to board immediately while mine requires verification?" Thompson's face hardened. "Sir, if you continue to be disruptive, we'll have to deny you boarding altogether." "Disruptive?" Jamal repeated incredulously. "I'm simply asking why my valid ticket is being questioned while others aren't." By now, a small crowd had gathered. Some passengers shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Others watched with undisguised curiosity. A few had their phones out, recording the interaction. "I paid for this ticket just like everyone else," Jamal continued, his voice steady despite the anger and humiliation building inside him. "I'm the CEO of a technology company heading to an important business meeting. I have every right to the seat I purchased." Thompson's response was to motion to a nearby security guard, Raymond Wilson, who approached with his hand resting casually on his taser. The message was clear: comply or face consequences. Looking around at the situation escalating before him, Jamal made a quick calculation. Missing this flight meant missing his meeting with Microsoft, potentially losing a life-changing opportunity for his company and the students who depended on it. Standing his ground might result in being detained, possibly worse. "Fine," he said finally, his voice low. "I'll take whatever seat is available in economy." "That's more like it," Thompson said with a smirk, typing rapidly into his computer. "We have a middle seat in row 32. As Jamal was handed his new boarding pass, a downgrade that wouldn't be refunded, he noticed a passenger directly filming the interaction. Their eyes met briefly, and the person gave him a small nod before continuing to record. What neither Jamal nor the airline staff realized was that this video would begin circulating on social media before the plane even took off, setting in motion events that would shake the airline industry to its core and force America to confront the reality of racism in commercial air travel. The narrow aisle of the economy section seemed to stretch endlessly as Jamal made his way toward the back of the plane. Each step felt like a public walk of shame, with curious passengers watching his slow progression to row 32. When he finally reached his assigned middle seat, he found himself sandwiched between two passengers who made no effort to hide their annoyance at having to stand to let him in. On his left sat Harold Fisher, a heavy-set businessman who immediately reclaimed the armrest and spread his newspapers and snacks across his tray table and part of Jamal's. On his right was Meredith Collins, a middle-aged woman who sighed dramatically as she removed her purse from Jamal's seat, then promptly put on an eye mask and angled her body away from him. The cramped space made it impossible for Jamal to open his laptop properly. After several frustrated attempts, he gave up and tried to use his phone instead, but the small screen was inadequate for the detailed presentation adjustments he needed to make. Every minute in this uncomfortable situation was a minute lost in preparation for the most important meeting of his career. About an hour into the flight, Jamal overheard two flight attendants, including Brenda from the gate, talking in the galley just a few rows ahead. "Can you believe that kid tried to sneak into first class?" one whispered loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "They always try something," Brenda replied. "Acting like he owned the place. Called himself a CEO. As if." Their laughter cut through Jamal like a knife. He closed his eyes, remembering his mother's words about keeping his head high but safe. Right now, he just needed to get through this flight. Midway through the journey, nature called, and Jamal made his way to the rear bathrooms, only to find all three occupied with a line forming. The seatbelt sign was off, and glancing forward, he noticed the first-class lavatory was vacant. After a moment's hesitation, he walked toward it. Just as he reached for the door handle, Brenda's voice rang out sharply. "Excuse me. That bathroom is for first-class passengers only." The entire forward cabin fell silent as all eyes turned to Jamal. "The other bathrooms are occupied with a waiting line," he explained quietly. "I thought since this one was empty." "Well, you thought wrong," Brenda interrupted loudly. "Just like you thought you could sit in first class. Back to your assigned area, please." Red-faced and humiliated once again, Jamal had no choice but to return to the back of the plane and wait his turn, feeling the stares of curious passengers following him. When he finally returned to his seat, he was surprised to find a white man in an expensive suit waiting in the aisle beside his row. The man introduced himself as Tyler Cooper, a marketing executive from first class. "I saw what happened up there," Tyler said, lowering his voice. "Pretty rough treatment. Listen, I like to mentor young people, especially minorities. If you're really interested in business, here's my card. Maybe I could give you some pointers about how to present yourself more professionally. Jamal accepted the card automatically, but something in Tyler's tone made him uneasy. The implication was clear: the problem wasn't the airline's discrimination but Jamal's failure to appear professional enough to be taken seriously. "Thank you," Jamal replied evenly, "but I'm actually doing quite well professionally. My company just closed a $2.5 million funding round last month." Tyler's patronizing smile didn't waver. "Right, the CEO thing. Look, kid, playing entrepreneur is great. I did it too at your age. But in the real world, you need connections and experience. Someone like me could help you navigate that world." Before Jamal could respond, Tyler patted his shoulder condescendingly and returned to first class, leaving Jamal seething with a complex mixture of anger, humiliation, and self-doubt. When the plane's Wi-Fi became available, Jamal connected his phone and was immediately bombarded with notifications. The video of his confrontation at the gate had already been shared thousands of times across multiple platforms. #FirstClassWhileBlack was trending nationally, with people sharing similar experiences and calling for boycotts of the airline. Among the notifications was a text from his mother: "Are you okay? I'm seeing something online about you and the airline. Call me when you land." Jamal switched off his phone, suddenly overwhelmed. He'd wanted to make headlines for his technological innovations, not for being the latest victim of a racist incident gone viral. He closed his eyes, trying to center himself and focus on the Microsoft meeting ahead, but all he could see was Brenda's dismissive expression, Thompson's threatening posture, and Tyler's condescending smile. By the time the captain announced their final descent into San Francisco, Jamal was exhausted, not from the 6-hour flight, but from the emotional labor of maintaining dignity in the face of repeated humiliation. As the plane touched down, he realized that the Microsoft presentation was now the least of his concerns. Something much bigger had been set in motion, and he was at the center of a storm he never asked for. The moment the wheels of the aircraft touched down at San Francisco International Airport, Jamal's phone erupted with a barrage of notifications. Texts, emails, missed calls, and social media alerts poured in faster than he could process them. The video had gone viral in the most explosive way possible, garnering millions of views in just a few hours. Major news outlets like CNN, MSNBC, and even international organizations were requesting statements. Civil rights organizations including the NAACP and Color of Change had issued scathing condemnations of the airline. The company's social media accounts were being flooded with angry comments demanding accountability. As passengers stood to retrieve their belongings, several now recognized Jamal from the viral video. Some offered sympathetic glances, while others whispered and pointed. One woman approached him directly. "I saw what they did to you," she said quietly. "It was wrong. I'm sorry I didn't speak up." The airline's response had already been posted online, a brief, corporate statement claiming the incident was simply a misunderstanding regarding our security protocols, and that they were committed to treating all passengers with respect. The hollow words only fueled public outrage. Disembarking the plane, Jamal was unprepared for what awaited him. Just past the jet bridge, a cluster of reporters and camera operators had gathered, somehow alerted to his arrival gate. Microphones were thrust toward him as questions came from all directions. "Jamal, how do you respond to the airline statement? Did anyone from the airline apologize to you personally? Will you be pursuing legal action? Can you describe how it felt to be discriminated against in front of all those people?" Stunned and overwhelmed, Jamal froze. He hadn't prepared for this. He was supposed to be rehearsing his Microsoft presentation, not navigating a media frenzy. Just as he was about to attempt a response, a commanding voice cut through the chaos. "Excuse me. Mr. Washington is late for our meeting. Please make way." The crowd parted to reveal Amanda Taylor, a senior executive from Microsoft whom Jamal recognized from her LinkedIn profile. Tall, confident, and radiating authority in her tailored suit, she moved through the reporters with practiced ease, placing herself between them and Jamal. "Mr. Washington is a valued business partner, and we have a scheduled meeting that cannot be delayed. He'll issue a statement through proper channels when he's ready. Now, please excuse us." With that, she expertly guided Jamal through the terminal, her hand lightly but firmly on his elbow. Only when they reached a quiet corridor did she stop and turn to face him. "I recognized you from your company profile," she explained. "I was on your flight, in first class. I saw everything, at the gate and on the plane. It was absolutely appalling." Jamal exhaled, not realizing he'd been holding his breath. "Thank you for the rescue. I wasn't prepared for all that." "Few people would be," Amanda replied. "Look, our meeting wasn't scheduled until tomorrow morning, but given what happened, I thought you might need a friendly face. And frankly, what I witnessed makes me even more certain that Microsoft should be working with leaders like you." For the first time since the ordeal began, Jamal felt something close to relief. Here was someone who had seen the discrimination firsthand and was acknowledging it without qualification or doubt. No gaslighting, no questioning whether he had somehow misinterpreted events or brought it on himself. As they made their way to baggage claim, Amanda spoke candidly about her own experiences as a woman in tech leadership and the subtle and not-so-subtle biases she had faced. Though not the same as racial discrimination, her understanding of navigational prejudice in professional spaces created a bridge of empathy. "The hardest part is that I couldn't even prepare properly for tomorrow," Jamal admitted, explaining how the cramped economy seat had prevented him from working on his presentation. "I had specific updates I wanted to make based on the latest user data." "We can push the meeting back a day if you need time," Amanda offered. "No," Jamal said firmly. "I won't let what happened derail this opportunity. The meeting stays as scheduled." At the hotel check-in, another layer of discrimination surfaced. Despite his reservation for a business suite, the front desk agent looked dubiously at Jamal in his slightly rumpled clothes. "ID and credit card, please," the agent requested, examining his driver's license with exaggerated scrutiny. "And what brings you to our hotel, sir?" The hesitation before "sir" spoke volumes. "Mr. Washington is here for meetings with Microsoft," Amanda interjected, placing her business card on the counter. "He's presenting to our executive team tomorrow. I trust he'll receive the professional courtesy our business partners expect." The transformation was immediate. Suddenly, Jamal was Mr. Washington, offered an upgraded room, and promised expedited room service if he required it. Once alone in his hotel room, the weight of the day finally crashed down on Jamal. He sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling slightly as he called his mother. "I saw it all, baby," Keisha said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "Are you really okay?" "I'm handling it," he answered, but his voice cracked on the last word. "Jamal Washington, you don't have to be strong right now," his mother said softly. "Not with me." With that permission, the dam broke. Jamal described everything: the public humiliation, the cramped discomfort of economy when he'd paid for first class, the patronizing mentorship offer, the bathroom incident, and the media ambush. Through it all, Keisha listened, occasionally murmuring words of support but mostly giving him space to process. "You know what hurts the most?" he finally said. "I did everything right. Good grades, built a successful company, created something that helps people, dressed professionally, spoke politely, and none of it mattered. They took one look at me and decided I didn't belong." "I know, baby," Keisha replied, her own voice thick with tears. "I know. But here's what I need you to hear: their behavior defines them, not you. You still have that meeting tomorrow, and you're going to walk in there as the CEO you are. Don't let them steal your purpose." After hanging up, Jamal stood before the bathroom mirror, straightening his shoulders and adjusting his tie, the one his mother had given him. Tomorrow would be different. It had to be. What do you think of how Jamal handled this situation so far? Comment number 1 if you think he responded with incredible restraint, or number 2 if you believe he should have been more assertive about his rights. Has something similar ever happened to you while traveling? The way Amanda stepped in shows the importance of allies, don't you think? Like this video if you appreciate seeing this important conversation brought to light, and subscribe for more stories that expose the reality of discrimination in America today. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination like this on your next flight? Let me know in the comments. Now, let's see what happens when Jamal finally makes it to that crucial Microsoft meeting. Morning arrived with the gentle chime of Jamal's alarm at 5:30 a.m. Despite the emotional turmoil of the previous day, he had trained himself to function on little sleep, a skill developed during the early days of building Novatech while maintaining his high school grades. He rose immediately, following the disciplined morning routine that had served him well: 20 minutes of meditation to clear his mind, 30 minutes of exercise to energize his body, and a protein-rich breakfast to fuel his brain. By 7 a.m., Jamal sat at the desk in his hotel room, making final adjustments to his presentation. The Microsoft headquarters in San Francisco was only a 15-minute ride away, but his meeting wasn't until 10 a.m. He used these precious hours to refine his slides, rehearse his talking points, and research the backgrounds of each executive who would be attending. As he worked, notifications continued to flood his phone. The airline incident had now made national headlines, with several major networks covering the story in their morning broadcasts. Jamal forced himself to ignore the distractions, placing his phone on "Do Not Disturb" mode and focusing entirely on the opportunity ahead. At 9:15 a.m., dressed in his freshly pressed suit and the tie his mother had given him, Jamal arrived at the Microsoft office building, 45 minutes early, just as Keisha had taught him. The receptionist greeted him with a smile that faltered slightly when he introduced himself. "Oh, Mr. Washington," she said, recognition dawning in her eyes. "Yes, the team is expecting you. Would you like some coffee while you wait?" By 9:45, Jamal was escorted to a large conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the San Francisco Bay. 5 Microsoft executives were already seated, including Amanda Taylor from the airport. She gave him an encouraging nod as he entered. "Mr. Washington," said a distinguished man at the head of the table, rising to shake his hand. "Robert Peterson, VP of Educational Partnerships. We're very interested in what Novatech has developed. Please, the floor is yours." Jamal connected his laptop to the projector and launched into his presentation. Despite the minimal preparation time on the flight, he delivered a compelling overview of Novatech's platform, supported by impressive data on student engagement and educational outcomes. He spoke with passion about the digital divide in STEM education and how Novatech was helping bridge that gap for underprivileged students. As he presented, Jamal noticed Robert Peterson watching him with unusual intensity. The executive's gaze wasn't dismissive or skeptical, rather, he seemed almost troubled, occasionally glancing down at his phone with a furrowed brow. When Jamal finished his presentation, the room erupted in enthusiastic applause. "This is exactly the kind of innovative approach to educational technology we've been looking for," said Robert. "Your platform's accessibility features and culturally responsive content are particularly impressive. I think there's significant potential for partnership here." The meeting continued with technical questions and business discussions. Throughout it all, Jamal answered with confidence and clarity, demonstrating not only his technical expertise but his deep understanding of educational needs and market dynamics. By the end of the 2-hour session, a preliminary partnership agreement was outlined, with Microsoft offering to provide cloud infrastructure support and marketing resources to help Novatech scale nationally. "Before we conclude," Robert said, "I'd like to invite Mr. Washington to join me for lunch. I have some additional thoughts I'd like to discuss privately." 30 minutes later, Jamal found himself seated across from Robert at an upscale restaurant near the office. After they ordered, Robert placed his phone on the table, screen up, showing a news article about the airline incident with Jamal's photo prominently displayed. "I believe congratulations are in order," Robert said unexpectedly. Not many CEOs get national news coverage the day before a major partnership meeting. Jamal tensed, unsure where this conversation was heading. "I wanted to discuss this privately," Robert continued, his tone serious. "I saw the video of what happened to you yesterday. I'd rather focus on our partnership discussion," Jamal replied cautiously. The partnership is moving forward, that's not in question, Robert assured him. Your technology and vision speak for themselves. But there's something you should know. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. The flight attendant in that video, Brenda Peterson, is my sister. Jamal froze, fork midway to his mouth. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. The executive who held the key to this life-changing partnership was directly related to the woman who had humiliated him in front of dozens of passengers. I haven't spoken to her yet, Robert continued, but I recognized her immediately in the video. We don't share the same last name because she kept her ex-husband's name after their divorce. A heavy silence fell between them. Jamal's mind raced, calculating the potential implications. Would Robert now doubt his account of the incident? Was this partnership suddenly in jeopardy? Should he downplay what happened to protect the deal? I don't know what to say, Jamal finally admitted. You don't need to say anything, Robert replied. I know my sister, Mr. Washington. She's always had certain views that I've strongly disagreed with. Our family dinners can get quite heated. He sighed deeply. What I saw in that video was inexcusable, regardless of who was involved. Robert's direct acknowledgement caught Jamal off guard. He had prepared himself for denial, for gaslighting, for being told he had misinterpreted the situation. The usual responses when racism was called out directly. The behavior you experienced represents everything wrong with how people of color are treated in this country, Robert continued. I'm deeply ashamed that my own sister was involved, but I'm not entirely surprised. He pulled out his phone again, showing Jamal that he had been on a call with the airline CEO, Jackson Williams, just before their lunch. I made it clear to Williams that what happened was unacceptable and that there must be consequences. Microsoft books thousands of flights with their airline annually for our executives and staff, a contract worth millions. I've informed him that relationship is now under review pending their handling of this incident. Jamal carefully placed his fork down, processing everything Robert was saying. I appreciate that, but I don't want special treatment just because of who I met with today. This isn't special treatment, Robert insisted. This is the bare minimum of accountability. What happened to you happens to people of color every day, but most don't have viral videos or connections to put pressure on companies. The system protects itself unless forced to change. As their conversation continued, Robert shared something unexpected. His own daughter was married to a black man, and they had 2 biracial children. He had witnessed firsthand how his son-in-law was treated differently in various settings, from restaurants to car dealerships to airports. I have a favor to ask, Robert said as their lunch concluded. I'd prefer if my connection to Brenda remains private for now. Not to protect her, she deserves whatever professional consequences come her way, but because I don't want the public to think Microsoft's partnership with Novatech is motivated by anything other than the excellence of your product. Jamal considered this request. On one hand, revealing Robert's connection to Brenda might add pressure for accountability. On the other, he didn't want anything overshadowing Novatech's achievement on its own merits. I can keep that information confidential, Jamal agreed, as long as the airline takes meaningful action. Not just a cursory apology or sensitivity training, but real consequences and systemic changes. You have my word that I'll use whatever influence I have to ensure that happens, Robert promised. And regardless of how this situation evolves, Microsoft is committed to working with Novatech. What you've built is too important to the future of educational equity. As they parted ways outside the restaurant, Robert shook Jamal's hand firmly. My sister's actions reflected her character, not yours. Never forget that. Walking back to his hotel, Jamal felt a complex mixture of emotions, validation from the partnership moving forward, vindication from Robert's unequivocal support, but also a lingering sense of unease about what would happen next. The story was no longer just about one incident on one flight. It had become something much larger, with corporate power players, family dynamics, and national attention all converging around him. His phone buzzed with a new notification. The airline CEO, Jackson Williams, was requesting a call with him at his earliest convenience. Jamal sat on the edge of his hotel bed, staring at the email from Jackson Williams, CEO of Atlantic Airways. The message was polite but urgent, requesting a private call to address the unfortunate incident that had occurred. After a moment's consideration, Jamal replied with his availability, suggesting a call in 1 hour, enough time to center himself and prepare mentally. When the phone rang precisely 60 minutes later, Jamal answered with a calm, "Hello, this is Jamal Washington." "Mr. Washington, Jackson Williams here. Thank you for taking my call." The CEO's voice was smooth and practiced, the tone of someone accustomed to navigating difficult conversations with carefully chosen words. "First, let me express my sincere apologies for your experience on our flight yesterday. What happened does not reflect the values of Atlantic Airways." Jamal remained silent, waiting for something more substantive than the corporate platitudes he'd already read in their public statement. "We pride ourselves on providing excellent service to all our passengers," Williams continued, filling the silence. "And clearly, we failed in this instance. I'd like to personally offer you a comprehensive remedy package, full reimbursement of your ticket, 10 complimentary first-class tickets to any destination we serve, and platinum status in our frequent flyer program for 1 year. Is that the standard offer when your staff discriminates against passengers?" Jamal asked evenly. Williams cleared his throat. "Mr. Washington, this is an exceptional offer that comes with strings attached, I assume," Jamal interrupted. "Let me guess, an NDA preventing me from discussing the incident publicly?" "We would ask for a mutual non-disclosure agreement and a statement acknowledging that the matter has been resolved to your satisfaction," Williams confirmed. "Standard practice in these situations." Jamal felt a surge of indignation. "Mr. Williams, what happened yesterday wasn't a spilled drink or a missed connection. Your staff publicly humiliated me because of the color of my skin. They denied me the service I paid for, threatened me with security when I calmly questioned the different treatment, and continued the discriminatory behavior throughout the flight. And now you want to buy my silence. I understand your frustration, but—" "No, I don't think you do," Jamal said firmly. "I'm not interested in free tickets or status upgrades. What I want is accountability and systemic change. Has Brenda Peterson been suspended pending investigation? What about Gerald Thompson, the gate supervisor? Are you reviewing your company's training protocols? Have you examined whether this reflects a pattern within your airline?" The silence on the other end of the line was telling. "I see," Jamal said. "So your solution is to quietly settle with me and hope this all blows over." "Mr. Washington," Williams tried again, his tone more direct now. "You're a businessman. Surely you understand that these matters are complex. We're conducting an internal review." "An internal review conducted by the same people who created the problem in the first place isn't a solution," Jamal countered. "I'm declining your offer, Mr. Williams. And I will not be signing any NDA." Just as the call ended, Jamal's phone lit up with another incoming call, this time from a number with a Washington, D.C. area code. "Mr. Washington, this is Special Agent Melissa Rodriguez with the FBI's Civil Rights Division. We've reviewed the video of your incident on Atlantic Airways yesterday and would like to speak with you about potentially opening an investigation into civil rights violations." The FBI's involvement elevated the situation to an entirely new level. Agent Rodriguez explained that discriminatory practices in public accommodations, including airlines, could constitute federal civil rights violations under certain circumstances. She requested a formal interview, which Jamal agreed to conduct the following morning. As news of the FBI's interest in the case broke, social media exploded with reactions. The hashtag #FirstClassWhileBlack had evolved into a movement, with thousands sharing similar stories of discrimination in travel, retail, hospitality, and other industries. Public figures, celebrities, and politicians began weighing in, many expressing support for Jamal and calling for boycotts of Atlantic Airways. But the online response wasn't universally supportive. A counternarrative emerged in certain corners of the internet, claiming Jamal had played the race card to gain attention for his company. Some commenters questioned whether he had been aggressive or disruptive at the gate, despite video evidence to the contrary. Others suggested he should have known his place and not made a scene. These comments, though painful to read, didn't surprise Jamal. What did surprise him was the volume of death threats that began arriving at Novatek's email address and social media accounts. Some were vague intimidations, while others contained specific, graphic descriptions of violence. Jamal forwarded these to Agent Rodriguez, who advised him to take security precautions. Meanwhile, Atlantic Airways released a more detailed statement, claiming their initial investigation suggested Jamal had displayed confrontational behavior that triggered standard security protocols. They stated that while they regretted how the situation was handled, their staff had acted according to training when faced with a potentially disruptive passenger. This victim-blaming approach only intensified public outrage. Several airline employees, speaking anonymously to journalists, contradicted the official narrative, describing a culture of unchecked bias within the company. One whistleblower revealed that certain staff regularly used coded language to flag passengers of color for additional scrutiny. Most significantly, journalist Sofia Rodriguez, no relation to Agent Rodriguez, began investigating Brenda Peterson's employment history and discovered a pattern of similar complaints. At least 7 formal grievances had been filed against Peterson for discriminatory treatment of passengers of color over her 12-year career with the airline, yet she had received no disciplinary action beyond additional training. As the story continued to unfold across national media, Jamal struggled with his sudden visibility. He had built Novatek to provide educational opportunities for underprivileged students, not to become the face of a racial justice movement. Yet he recognized that his platform gave him a responsibility to speak truth to power in ways others couldn't. "You don't have to be the spokesperson if you don't want to," Keisha told him during their nightly call. She had arrived in San Francisco that afternoon, unable to bear being separated from her son during this ordeal. "You've got your company to think about, your future." "But that's just it, Mom," Jamal replied, pacing his hotel room. "This isn't just about me anymore. If someone in my position, with resources and visibility, doesn't stand up, what hope is there for the everyday person who experiences this kind of discrimination with no recourse?" Keisha studied her son with pride tinged with maternal worry. "You remind me so much of your father right now," she said softly. "He always said that comfort isn't the measure of a life well lived, courage is." The mention of his father, who had passed away when Jamal was just 7, struck a deep chord. Michael Washington had been a community organizer who fought for better housing conditions in their Chicago neighborhood. He had taught Jamal that standing up for justice wasn't optional, it was an obligation. That night, Jamal made his decision. He would not be silenced by corporate settlements or intimidated by online threats. He would use his unexpected platform to push for real accountability and change. With his mother's help, he prepared a statement for release the following day, outlining his experience and his demands for Atlantic Airways: transparency in their investigation, appropriate disciplinary action, revised training protocols, and independent oversight of their customer service practices. As they finalized the statement, breaking news alerts lit up both their phones. An anonymous employee had leaked internal emails from Atlantic Airways revealing that the company used passenger appearance metrics as part of their enhanced security screening guidelines. The leaked documents showed that these metrics disproportionately targeted passengers of color, particularly Black and Middle Eastern travelers, for additional scrutiny, including verification of premium cabin tickets. The revelation transformed what some had dismissed as an isolated incident into evidence of systemic discrimination. Atlantic Airways stock plummeted 15% in after-hours trading as shareholders panicked over the potential legal and financial ramifications. Jackson Williams announced an emergency press conference scheduled for the following morning. In a surprising move, his office reached out to Jamal with an invitation to attend as an honored guest to demonstrate the company's commitment to making things right. Jamal shared the invitation with Agent Rodriguez, who advised caution. "This has all the hallmarks of a PR stunt," she warned. They're trying to control the narrative by making it appear that you've accepted their apology and moved on. Despite these concerns, Jamal decided to attend. Not as the compliant prop Williams likely hoped for, but as a witness to ensure the truth couldn't be buried beneath corporate spin. As he and Keisha prepared for bed, knowing the next day would be pivotal, Jamal received one final message, from Robert Peterson at Microsoft. Just heard about tomorrow's press conference, the message read. I'll be watching closely. Stand your ground. You have more support than you know. The morning of the press conference dawned with a media frenzy outside the Atlantic Airways headquarters in downtown San Francisco. News vans lined the street, reporters did live stand-ups for morning broadcasts, and a small group of protesters carried signs reading, "First-class rights for all," and "Boycott Atlantic Airways." Security personnel maintained a tight perimeter around the building, checking credentials before allowing anyone to approach the main entrance. Jamal and Keisha arrived 30 minutes early, as was their habit. They were immediately escorted through a side entrance to avoid the media gauntlet and led to a small waiting room adjacent to the conference hall. A corporate communications representative offered them coffee and attempted small talk, which they politely declined. The atmosphere was tense, with staff members hurrying past the open door, speaking in hushed tones. "Remember," Keisha whispered to her son, "no matter what they say in there, you know the truth. Stand in that truth." Jamal nodded, adjusting his tie, the same one he'd worn since this ordeal began, now something of a personal talisman. He had prepared himself for various scenarios, a superficial apology, a settlement offer disguised as corporate accountability, perhaps even an attempt to shift blame. What he hadn't prepared for was coming face to face with Brenda Peterson. Yet there she was, being escorted into the waiting room by another corporate representative. She looked markedly different from the confident, dismissive flight attendant who had humiliated him. Her face was pale, her posture rigid with tension. When she spotted Jamal, she froze momentarily before being guided to a seat on the opposite side of the room. No introductions were made. No acknowledgement of the electric tension filling the space. They sat in uncomfortable silence until a young assistant appeared at the door, announcing that the press conference would begin in 5 minutes and they should take their places. The conference hall was packed with journalists, cameras, and recording equipment. At the front, a podium stood flanked by Atlantic Airways' corporate logo and an American flag. CEO Jackson Williams was already positioned behind the microphone, his expression grave yet composed. Jamal and Brenda were directed to separate chairs on the stage, creating a tableau that the assembled press eagerly photographed, the accuser and accused, the young black CEO and the white flight attendant, positioned like adversaries in a corporate court. Williams began with a carefully crafted statement about Atlantic Airways' unwavering commitment to equality and respect for all passengers, before addressing the incident directly. "We have completed our preliminary investigation into the events aboard Flight 1382 from Chicago to San Francisco," he announced. "After reviewing all available evidence, including security footage, witness statements, and employee interviews, we have determined that this unfortunate incident resulted from a miscommunication regarding our premium cabin verification procedures." Jamal felt his stomach tighten. The sanitized corporate language was already working to reframe what had happened, transforming clear discrimination into a benign miscommunication. "While we acknowledge that Mr. Washington's experience was distressing," Williams continued, "we must also recognize the challenging environment our flight crew operates within, where split-second decisions must often be made regarding passenger management and security protocols." The implication was clear: they were positioning this as a reasonable security measure rather than a discriminatory act. Jamal glanced at his mother, who maintained a dignified poker face despite the growing mischaracterization. In light of these findings, Atlantic Airways will be implementing additional training for all customer-facing staff to enhance communication clarity. However, we have found no evidence of intentional discrimination that would warrant disciplinary action against any specific employee. A murmur ran through the assembled journalists. Several began shouting questions, but Williams raised his hand for silence. Furthermore, he added, his tone shifting subtly, we cannot ignore that this incident has generated significant publicity for Mr. Washington's company, which has reportedly seen increased investor interest since the video went viral. While we do not suggest this was his intention, we must acknowledge that his business has benefited substantially from this exposure. The accusation hung in the air like a noxious gas. Williams was not only exonerating his company but implying that Jamal had somehow exploited the situation for professional gain. It was a calculated move to reposition Atlantic Airways as the victim of opportunism rather than the perpetrator of discrimination. Jamal felt a surge of anger threatening to overwhelm his carefully maintained composure. Williams was now inviting him to make a brief statement, clearly expecting a polite acceptance of this narrative in exchange for whatever private settlement they had likely prepared. As Jamal stood and approached the podium, the room fell silent. He placed his prepared statement on the surface but did not immediately speak. Instead, he took a moment to look directly at the assembled journalists, making eye contact with as many as possible. "I came here today expecting accountability," he began, his voice steady despite his internal turmoil. "Instead, I've witnessed something all too familiar to Black Americans, the transformation of victim into villain. Let me be absolutely clear, I did not ask to be discriminated against. I did not ask to be humiliated in front of dozens of passengers. I did not ask to become the center of a national conversation about race and corporate accountability. I simply asked to sit in the seat I paid for." The room was completely still now, every journalist focused intently on his words. The suggestion that I or my company have somehow benefited from this trauma is not just false, it's offensive. No amount of publicity could compensate for being treated as less than human because of the color of my skin. Jamal was about to continue when a commotion at the back of the room drew everyone's attention. A man in a business suit was making his way purposefully toward the stage. With shock, Jamal recognized Robert Peterson from Microsoft. Security personnel moved to intercept him, but Williams waved them off, clearly recognizing the Microsoft executive. The confusion in the room was palpable as Robert strode directly to the podium. Jamal stepped aside, uncertain what was happening. "My name is Robert Peterson, Vice President of Educational Partnerships at Microsoft," he announced without preamble. "I was not scheduled to speak today, but I can no longer remain silent while a gross injustice is being committed in the name of corporate damage control." He turned to look directly at Brenda, who had gone even paler at his appearance. "Brenda Peterson is my sister." The revelation sent shockwaves through the room. Journalists who had been furiously taking notes now froze, pens hovering over notepads. Cameras that had been focused on Jamal now swung to capture this unexpected development. "I saw the video of what happened to Mr. Washington, and I recognized my sister immediately," Robert continued. "I want to be absolutely clear, what occurred on that flight was not a miscommunication or a procedural misunderstanding. It was discrimination, plain and simple." Williams attempted to regain control, stepping toward Robert with an outstretched hand. "Mr. Peterson, this is hardly the appropriate forum for family matters." "On the contrary," Robert interrupted, "this is precisely the appropriate forum. Microsoft has maintained a corporate travel contract with Atlantic Airways worth approximately $50 million annually. As of this morning, that contract is terminated." The announcement landed like a bomb in the room. Financial reporters immediately began tapping on their phones, likely checking the real-time impact on Atlantic Airways' already fragile stock price. Furthermore, Robert continued, "Microsoft will be implementing a new policy of working exclusively with transportation providers that have verifiable anti-discrimination policies and practices in place. We believe that other major tech companies will follow suit." He turned to face his sister directly. "Brenda, I love you as my sister, but I cannot and will not defend actions that perpetuate the systemic racism that continues to plague our country. This isn't about politics or cancel culture or any other deflection. It's about basic human dignity and respect." Brenda's composure finally broke. Tears streamed down her face as she stood up shakily. "You don't understand the pressure we're under," she said, her voice cracking. "We're told to watch for certain types of passengers, certain behaviors. I was just following what I've been taught. By whom? A journalist shouted from the crowd. Who instructed you to target passengers based on race? The question hung in the air as Brenda looked helplessly toward Williams and other airline executives on the stage. Their tight expressions and subtle head shakes communicated a clear message: don't answer that. But the damage was already done. Brenda's partial admission, combined with the leaked documents about passenger appearance metrics, had effectively confirmed the systematic nature of the discrimination. Williams made a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, returning to the podium with forced confidence. We will need to temporarily suspend this press conference to address some new information that has come to light. We ask for your patience as we... He was interrupted by the appearance of another unexpected figure at the side of the stage, a woman in a dark suit who flashed a badge to the security personnel. Special Agent Melissa Rodriguez, FBI Civil Rights Division, she announced, approaching the podium. In light of the evidence that has emerged regarding potentially systematic civil rights violations by Atlantic Airways, I'm here to announce that we are launching a formal investigation into the company's passenger screening and treatment practices. The press conference had completely derailed from Williams' carefully planned narrative. As journalists shouted questions from every direction, Jamal felt a hand on his arm. It was his mother, quietly guiding him toward the exit. "You've said what needed to be said," she whispered. "Let them deal with the consequences now." As they stepped outside into the San Francisco sunshine, Jamal took his first deep breath in what felt like days. The airline executives were now in a closed-door emergency session with their legal team. The stock was in freefall. The FBI investigation was underway. Robert Peterson had sacrificed a family relationship to stand for what was right. And in the midst of all this corporate and legal chaos, a teenage boy approached Jamal on the sidewalk, nervousness evident in his posture. "Excuse me," he said. "You're Jamal Washington, right? The CEO of Novatech? I saw what happened to you online. I just wanted to say, I'm black too, and I want to start my own tech company someday. Seeing you stand up like that, not backing down, it matters. It really matters." In that moment, looking at the hope in the young man's eyes, Jamal understood that sometimes the most important revolutions aren't the ones that make headlines. They're the quiet shifts in what the next generation believes is possible for themselves. The aftermath of the chaotic press conference spread through social media and news outlets like wildfire. Hashtag Atlantic Airways Exposed was now trending even higher than the original hashtag FirstClassWhileBlack hashtag. Financial analysts were predicting catastrophic consequences for the airline as their stock continued its precipitous decline, with trading temporarily halted after triggering circuit breakers. Jamal and Keisha had barely made it back to their hotel when his phone rang with a call from Jackson Williams himself. "Mr. Washington," the CEO's voice had lost its smooth corporate polish, replaced by barely contained panic. "I'm requesting an emergency meeting with you, privately, no press. Things have obviously taken an unexpected turn, and I believe it would be mutually beneficial for us to speak directly." "I think we've both said everything that needs to be said," Jamal replied coolly. "Please," Williams insisted, his desperation palpable even through the phone. 15 minutes of your time could prevent the collapse of a company that employs over 20,000 people. Whatever your demands are, we're prepared to meet them." Jamal muted the phone and looked at his mother. "He sounds desperate." "Of course he is," Keisha said. "Their stock is crashing, Microsoft just pulled a $50 million contract, and the FBI is investigating them. But remember, none of this is your responsibility to fix." After a moment's reflection, Jamal unmuted the call. "Mr. Williams, I'll meet with you under two conditions. First, Agent Rodriguez from the FBI is present. Second, no lawyers or PR people, just you, me, and whoever else was directly involved in creating and enforcing the discriminatory policies that led to this incident." Williams hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with these terms. The FBI's presence would make this a formal interview rather than a negotiation. "That's not negotiable," Jamal interrupted. If your company truly has nothing to hide about its practices, then Agent Rodriguez's presence shouldn't be a concern. After another pause, Williams reluctantly agreed. A meeting was scheduled for 3 p.m. that afternoon in a neutral location, a conference room at the FBI's San Francisco field office. When Jamal arrived with Keisha and Agent Rodriguez, they found Williams already waiting, accompanied by Brenda Peterson and 2 other Atlantic Airways executives, Chief of Operations Victor Mercer and Head of Security Protocols Diana Walsh. All 3 executives looked like they hadn't slept, their usual corporate polish diminished by the crisis. Agent Rodriguez began by explaining that while this wasn't a formal deposition, anything said could potentially be used in the FBI's ongoing investigation. She then invited Jamal to speak first. "I'm not here for money or special treatment," Jamal stated clearly. "I'm here because what happened to me is happening to people who look like me every day, on your airline and others. The difference is that most of those incidents don't go viral, and most of those people don't have the platform I've been given. So I'm going to ask some direct questions, and I expect honest answers." He turned to Diana Walsh first. "The leaked documents mention passenger appearance metrics used for additional screening. Can you explain exactly what those metrics entail?" Walsh shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Williams, who gave a resigned nod. "The security protocols were implemented after September 11th, she began carefully. They include various risk indicators based on behavioral assessment, booking patterns, and, yes, certain demographic factors." "By demographic factors, you mean race," Agent Rodriguez clarified. "Not explicitly," Walsh hedged. "The language in the protocols refers to passenger profiles consistent with historical security incidents. Which in practice means targeting people of color, particularly Black and Middle Eastern passengers," Jamal stated flatly. Walsh didn't deny it. "The protocols were designed to be applied judiciously, with professional discretion." "And who trains your staff on applying this professional discretion?" Agent Rodriguez asked. All eyes turned to Victor Mercer, who cleared his throat nervously. "The training program was developed under my supervision, based on industry standards and security consultants' recommendations." "Does this training include any content on implicit bias or racial profiling prevention?" Jamal asked. Mercer's silence was answer enough. Jamal turned to Brenda next. "When you saw me in the first-class line, what specific security concern did I present?" For the first time, Brenda looked directly at him, her expression a complex mixture of defensiveness and shame. "We're trained to identify passengers who don't fit the typical profile of the cabin class. It's not just about race, it's about dress, demeanor, age. But primarily race," Jamal pressed. After a long pause, Brenda nodded almost imperceptibly. "In practice, yes. We don't talk about it explicitly, but it's understood." "And how many white passengers have you asked to verify their first-class tickets multiple times?" Jamal asked. "I don't keep count, but—" "Let me help you," Jamal interrupted, his voice level but intense. "Agent Rodriguez has preliminary findings from passenger complaints filed against Atlantic Airways over the past 3 years. Care to guess what percentage of premium cabin verification incidents involved passengers of color, despite them making up less than 15% of your first-class travelers?" Williams intervened before she could answer. "Mr. Washington, we acknowledge there have been significant failures in our systems and culture. That's why we're here, to make this right. Name your terms." "My terms?" Jamal repeated, incredulous. "Mr. Williams, you still don't understand. This isn't a settlement negotiation. This is about fundamental change. Your company has been systematically discriminating against passengers based on their race, causing countless people humiliation and trauma, and you're trying to reduce it to a business transaction." Williams' facade finally cracked. "What do you want me to say? That we've been enabling discrimination?" "Fine. Yes. The airline industry has been doing this for decades. After September 11th, it became standard practice, encouraged by government agencies, embedded in training. By the time I became CEO, these practices were so normalized they were barely questioned. The room fell silent at this outburst. Agent Rodriguez was taking detailed notes. "So you knew," Jamal said quietly. "Of course I knew," Williams admitted, deflated. "But changing entrenched practices in a company this size, with unions and regulatory compliance and shareholder expectations, it's complicated." "Being treated like a human being shouldn't be complicated," Keisha spoke up for the first time, her voice carrying the weight of a lifetime of similar experiences. "My son was humiliated because of the color of his skin. That's not a complicated system failure. It's wrong. Period." Williams looked genuinely chastened. "You're right. And I'm sorry." He turned to Jamal. "Truly sorry, not just as a CEO protecting his company, but as a person who failed to stop a practice I knew was wrong." The admission seemed sincere, but Jamal remained unmoved. "Apologies are meaningless without action, Mr. Williams." "Tell me what action you want to see," Williams said. "I'm serious. Whatever changes you believe necessary, I will implement them." Before Jamal could respond, the conference room door opened, and a group of people in expensive suits entered, members of Atlantic Airways Board of Directors, led by Chairwoman Eleanor Richards. "Jackson, a word," Richards said tersely. "Now." Williams looked conflicted but stood to join the board members in the hallway. Through the glass walls of the conference room, Jamal could see an intense discussion taking place, with Richards doing most of the talking while Williams increasingly appeared defeated. When they returned, Richards took control immediately. "Mr. Washington, I'm Eleanor Richards, Chairwoman of Atlantic Airways Board of Directors. The board has convened an emergency session in light of today's developments. Effective immediately, Jackson Williams is being placed on administrative leave pending a complete review of the company's leadership and practices." Williams looked shell-shocked but didn't protest. "Furthermore," Richards continued, "we are announcing a comprehensive overhaul of all security and service protocols, with immediate suspension of any procedures that could enable or encourage discriminatory treatment of passengers." Agent Rodriguez interjected, "The FBI will require full transparency into these changes as part of our investigation." "You'll have it," Richards assured her. "We're also establishing an independent oversight committee composed of civil rights experts, diversity consultants, and passenger advocates to review and reform our practices." She turned to Brenda. "Ms. Peterson will be placed on administrative leave pending completion of sensitivity training and a formal review of her conduct." While her brother's revelations at the press conference were unexpected and unorthodox, they highlighted serious concerns that cannot be ignored. Finally, Richards addressed Jamal directly. "Mr. Washington, on behalf of Atlantic Airways Board of Directors, I extend our deepest apologies for the inexcusable treatment you experienced. We would like to offer you a position on our newly formed Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Board, with a substantial honorarium for your expertise and perspective." It was a stunning reversal, a corporate board taking decisive action rather than circling the wagons. Jamal considered the offer carefully before responding. "I appreciate the gesture, but I must decline," he said. "My expertise is in educational technology, not airline operations or diversity consulting. There are qualified professionals who specialize in corporate anti-racism work who would serve you better." Richards looked surprised but nodded respectfully. However, Jamal continued, "I do have a counterproposal. My company, Nova Tech, specializes in creating accessible, effective digital learning platforms. We could develop customized training software specifically designed to address bias and discrimination in the transportation industry, incorporating real-world scenarios and measurable outcomes." The board members exchanged glances, clearly intrigued by the idea. Jamal continued, outlining how such a platform could be more effective than traditional sensitivity training, with real-time feedback, scenario-based learning, and concrete metrics to track progress. "This wouldn't be just for Atlantic Airways," he explained. "It could become an industry standard, transforming how all transportation companies approach these issues." Richards was nodding now, genuine interest replacing her earlier crisis management expression. That's actually a brilliant proposal. Software that could systematically address the human factors behind discrimination while providing accountable metrics would be revolutionary in our industry. As the details were discussed, Jamal caught his mother's eye. She gave him a subtle nod of approval. He had found a way to transform his personal trauma into systemic change, using his actual expertise rather than becoming a token diversity appointment. By the end of the meeting, the framework of an agreement was in place. Novatech would develop specialized anti-bias training software for Atlantic Airways, with the airline serving as the pilot customer for what could potentially become an industry-wide solution. The contract would be substantial, enough to triple Novatech's current valuation overnight. But with strict performance metrics tied to measurable reductions in discriminatory incidents. As they prepared to leave, Agent Rodriguez pulled Jamal aside. "This doesn't end our investigation," she said quietly. "What they've admitted to today likely violates several federal statutes. But I must say, your solution is impressively constructive. Most people in your position would be focused solely on punishment. Punishment without transformation doesn't create lasting change," Jamal replied, echoing something his father used to say. "The goal isn't to destroy Atlantic Airways, it's to make sure what happened to me stops happening to others." Outside the FBI building, as Jamal and Keisha waited for their rideshare, a text message arrived from Robert Peterson, "Just heard about the board's decision and your counterproposal. Microsoft would be very interested in helping scale this solution across the transportation sector. Let's talk tomorrow." For the first time since this ordeal began, Jamal felt a genuine sense of hope. What had started as a humiliating incident of discrimination was transforming into an opportunity for meaningful, measurable change, not just for one airline or one passenger, but potentially for an entire industry. 1 month later, Jamal Washington stood at Gate 14 of O'Hare International Airport, preparing to board another Atlantic Airways flight to San Francisco. So much had changed in those 30 days that it felt like years had passed since that first fateful journey. The airline had undergone a comprehensive restructuring. Jackson Williams had formally resigned as CEO, replaced by Eleanor Richards as interim chief executive while a search for permanent leadership was conducted, with an explicit focus on diverse candidates. Brenda Peterson had completed intensive anti-bias training and issued a public apology to Jamal, acknowledging that her actions had been influenced by unconscious prejudices she was now working to address. The discriminatory, passenger appearance metrics had been completely abolished, replaced by standardized verification procedures applied equally to all passengers regardless of race or appearance. Most significantly, Atlantic Airways had signed a multi-million-dollar contract with Novatech to develop and implement comprehensive anti-bias training software for all customer-facing staff. The partnership had attracted industry-wide attention, with several other major airlines expressing interest in adopting the platform once completed. Microsoft had expanded their initial partnership with Novatech beyond educational technology to include support for this new corporate training initiative. Robert Peterson had become a personal mentor to Jamal, providing guidance on navigating the complex landscape of corporate relationships and social change. The Peterson siblings were slowly rebuilding their relationship as well, with Brenda beginning to acknowledge and confront the biases that had shaped her worldview. The FBI investigation into Atlantic Airways practices had resulted in a substantial settlement with the Justice Department, including financial penalties and mandatory compliance with new anti-discrimination standards. More importantly, the case had triggered a broader industry-wide examination of how airlines trained staff and treated passengers of color. As Jamal approached the boarding gate, he noticed several changes immediately. Clear signage explained the boarding process in multiple languages, with explicit statements about passenger rights and the airline's non-discrimination policy. Staff wore newly designed badges that included not just names but also languages spoken and pronouns. Most notably, there was a QR code prominently displayed that passengers could scan to report any concerns about their treatment, linked directly to the airline's new independent oversight committee. When his boarding group was called, Jamal presented his first-class ticket with a small flutter of anxiety, the memory of his previous humiliation still fresh. The gate agent, a young black woman named Tasha, smiled warmly as she scanned his pass. "All set, Mr. Washington," she said. "We're honored to have you on board today." The captain asked me to extend his personal welcome. As Jamal walked down the jet bridge, he reflected on how one incident had cascaded into a movement for accountability and change. His phone buzzed with a notification. Novatech's educational platform had just surpassed 1 million student users across the country, with particularly strong adoption in underprivileged school districts. The company's valuation had quadrupled, allowing Jamal to establish a scholarship fund for young people of color interested in technology careers. Stepping onto the plane, Jamal was greeted by the captain himself, a tall black man in his 50s named Captain James Wilson, who had specifically requested to pilot this flight after learning Jamal would be on board. "Mr. Washington," Captain Wilson said, extending his hand. "It's a privilege to meet you. What you did has changed things for all of us." In first class, Jamal settled into his seat, the spaciousness and comfort a stark contrast to his cramped economy experience a month ago. As he opened his laptop to review the latest development metrics for the anti-bias training software, a flight attendant approached with a pre-departure beverage. "Mr. Washington, welcome aboard," she said. "We're all required to complete the first module of your company's training program now. It's already making a difference in how we think about our interactions with passengers." As the plane taxied for takeoff, Jamal gazed out the window at the Chicago skyline. He thought about the long journey that had brought him here, not just the past month of corporate negotiations and media attention, but the years of determination that had preceded it. His mother's sacrifices, working double shifts as a nurse to provide for him. The librarian who had stayed late so he could use the computers. The teachers who had recognized and nurtured his potential. He also thought about the young black teenager who had approached him after the press conference, seeing in Jamal a reflection of his own possibilities. That encounter had inspired Jamal's latest initiative, a mentorship program connecting successful black entrepreneurs with young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, providing not just guidance but also seed funding for their business ideas. The program was named after his father, Michael Washington, who had always believed that opening doors for others was the true measure of success. "They'll try to keep you out of first class in life," his mother had told him before his first flight. "Your job is to hold the door open for others once you get there." As the plane accelerated down the runway and lifted into the sky, Jamal felt a profound sense of purpose. What had begun as a personal humiliation had transformed into an opportunity for systemic change. He had refused to be silenced or bought off. He had leveraged his platform and privilege to address a problem much bigger than himself. The path forward wouldn't be easy. Corporate culture didn't change overnight, and there would inevitably be resistance, backlash, and setbacks. But something fundamental had shifted, not just in one airline's policies or one young CEO's trajectory, but in the broader conversation about race, respect, and belonging in America. Jamal opened his notebook and began jotting down ideas for his next project. There was still so much work to be done, so many doors to be opened, so many voices to be amplified. But for the first time, he felt certain that change was not just possible but inevitable, one seat, one flight, one policy at a time. What would you do if you were in Jamal's position? Would you have had the courage to stand up against discrimination, or would you have accepted the airline's initial settlement offer? Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives about overcoming injustice. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Remember, real change happens when we refuse to accept the status quo and work together toward a more equitable future. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Jamal Washington's journey teaches us that confronting discrimination requires both courage and strategic thinking. His experience shows that systemic racism persists even for accomplished individuals, yet also demonstrates that meaningful change is possible when we refuse to be silenced. The story highlights how proper documentation and witnesses transform individual incidents into catalysts for institutional reform. True leadership means using your position to create doors for others, not just walking through them yourself. Jamal could have accepted a settlement for personal gain, but instead leveraged his platform to create lasting change that would benefit countless others facing similar discrimination. The unexpected allyship of Robert Peterson reminds us that standing for what's right sometimes means making difficult personal choices. Corporate accountability happens when those with influence prioritize human dignity over institutional protection. Most importantly, this story shows that transforming systems requires converting outrage into constructive solutions. Jamal's approach, developing training software rather than just punishing the airline, exemplifies how specialized expertise can address root causes of discrimination, creating sustainable change rather than temporary visibility. Would you have the courage to refuse an easy settlement and push for systemic change like Jamal did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful narratives about overcoming injustice. Don't forget to share this video with friends and family who need to hear this message of courage and transformation. Thank you for watching, and remember, real change begins when we refuse to accept discrimination as just the way things are.